They were a quiet couple, two men in love, living a simple life in Bristol. No scandals, no enemies, no warning. But in July 2024, their dismembered bodies were discovered stuffed into suitcases and dumped on the iconic Clifton Suspension Bridge. What followed was one of the most disturbing murder investigations in modern UK history. This is the story of the Clifton Suitcase Murders. It was a warm evening on July 10th, 2024. Locals and tourists strolled across the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol, enjoying the view of the Avon Gorge. But around 11 p.m., two bystanders noticed something strange. A man, nervous, twitchy, was struggling with two large suitcases near the edge of the bridge. Moments later, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving the cases behind. When police were alerted, officers approached cautiously. What they found inside changed everything. Two blood-soaked suitcases. Inside, human remains, not just dumped, but dismembered. The bridge, a symbol of beauty and architecture, was now a crime scene. It didn't take long to identify the victims. The bodies belonged to Albert Alfonso, 62, and Paul Longworth, 71. A couple who had been together for over a decade. Quiet, respectful, retired, loved by neighbors. No history of conflict. The investigation immediately turned personal. This wasn't a random act. It was calculated, and it was cruel. Autopsies confirmed the worst. Both men had been tortured, mutilated, and killed with extreme violence, then hacked apart with surgical precision. Who could hate them that much? CCTV footage near the bridge and a sharp-eyed witness helped track the man seen with the suitcases. Just 3 days later, police arrested Justin Andres Mosquera, a 34-year-old Colombian national, at Bristol Temple Meads railway station. Mosquera had no clear connection to the victims, at least not at first glance. But investigators dug deeper. What they found suggested a disturbing motive rooted in obsession, manipulation, and jealousy. Albert and Paul were private, but Mosquera had met Albert through online forums 2 years earlier. Police found a trail of messages, innocent at first, but increasingly erratic. Mosquera had become obsessed with Albert, convinced that he had been led on, betrayed, humiliated. Friends of Albert say he tried to cut ties when things got strange, but Mosquera wasn't ready to let go. Prosecutors alleged that Mosquera traveled to Bristol under false pretenses, convinced that Albert had wronged him and needed to pay. He arrived with tools, a burner phone, and the suitcases he would later use to dispose of the bodies. On July 8th, 2 days before the suitcases were found, Albert and Paul were last seen alive. Neighbors recalled hearing banging sounds that night, but thought nothing of it. Police now believe Mosquera entered their home under the guise of reconciliation. What happened next was pure horror. He bound them, tortured them, murdered them, slowly. Some forensic experts say it could have taken hours. He stayed in the flat for a full day, cleaning, dismembering, packing the remains. And when night fell on July 10th, he dragged the cases to the bridge, planning to dump them into the Avon Gorge. But something interrupted him. He panicked, fled, and left behind everything. In April 2025, Mosquera's trial began at the Old Bailey. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the case of Albert Alfonso, but not murder, and he denied any involvement in Paul Longworth's death. The prosecution rejected his plea outright. They argued that this was a premeditated double murder, not a crime of passion or diminished capacity. Shocking new details emerged during the trial. Diaries, voice memos, even footage Mosquera filmed of himself before the murders, rambling about betrayal, punishment, justice. The prosecution painted a chilling portrait, a man who couldn't accept rejection, who transformed love into rage, and whose revenge knew no bounds. Forensic evidence was overwhelming. Blood traces matched the victims. Mosquera's fingerprints were found on duct tape and inside the home. The suitcases were bought weeks in advance. And most damning, a confession-style video on his phone. He never thought he'd be caught, but in his arrogance he recorded everything. The jury sat in silence as the footage played, Mosquera's cold, flat voice describing what he planned to do, how he'd do it, and why. The defense tried to argue for mental health issues, but experts disagreed. He knew what he was doing, he planned it, and he tried to cover it up. The trial is ongoing, but the families of Albert and Paul are already living with a life sentence of grief. In a public statement, Paul's niece said, "They were two gentle souls who never hurt anyone, and they were taken from us in the most brutal way imaginable." Bristol remains shaken. The bridge, once a romantic spot, now bears the memory of a horror that unfolded in plain sight. Sometimes monsters don't hide in shadows. They smile, they chat, they wait, and when the moment is right, they strike. This was the story of Albert and Paul, two men who deserved peace, and of one man who mistook obsession for justice. Justice, now, is catching up with him.